Hi, my name is Lydia Coelho, and today we will be talking about the Freud and Jung's psychoanalytic theory from the perspective of a children's book. So today I chose to talk about the Lorax. The Lorax, it's a book that was written by Dr. Seuss in 1971, and basically talks to us about the dark side of capitalism, but it also teaches children a great lesson and the link between mindless consumption and ecological damage. The Lorax has three main characters, and that's the Onsler, Ted, and the Lorax. So the Onsler is this greedy, materialistic, selfish, and moral businessman that basically destroys the complete forest. And then we have the Lorax, which he is an activism. He preserves the environment. He's the voice of nature. And the Lorax and the Onsler, throughout the Lorax book, we get to see that they have constant arguments. And mostly because the Onsler keeps destroying and destroying the forest, and he, of course, becomes very wealthy. But the wealthier he becomes, the more greedy he becomes. And then the Lorax keeps, reminding the Onsler, if you keep destroying the forest, then you're killing the animals and the forest, and eventually you're gonna be left with nothing. And then we have Ted. Ted is a 12-year-old boy that lives in Teenyville City, and this city is basically everything manufactured, even air. The book says that air was sold in bottles, and that's because there's no real trees. So Ted wants to seek, his own pleasure, and from a Freudian perspective, we get to see that Ted, not only he wants to impress a girl, but he wants to, look out for that thing that is gonna bring pleasure to him, and that is, finding an actual tree. So Ted goes in the lookout for the Onsler, and he finally gets to talk to the Onsler and tells him, "Sir, do you know where I can find a tree?" The Onsler agrees to tell Ted where to find one, but first he must be willing to listen to the Onsler story. So we get to see that by the end of the book, the Onsler, I guess, he had an epiphany, and he changed the view that he will see the forest at first, but that only became because he basically destroyed the whole forest and left other people without anything. So before we get to talk about the personality of each character, I would like to identify from a Jung's archetype perspective what each character represents in the Lorax. So the Lorax represents all companies and protesters against dumping products in all animals' environment. The Onsler stands for companies that don't care about the environment and will do anything for money. Ted represents all generations to come after the Lorax and the Onsler. As you can see, Ted is the one that, seeks the Onsler to actually find a real tree. And by the end of the story, we get to see that the Onsler actually gave Ted the last truffle seed, and that truffle seed represents, well, the hope for the future. We get to see that the smoke represents all air pollution made by companies. Truffle trees represents the material that companies use for themselves, that is from the environment, and the needs in real life represent any company's products made from things from the environment. So who is the Onsler? Like I mentioned before, the Onsler is very greedy, very materialistic. He doesn't care about others, and we get to see examples in the book, and we see that the Onsler family became just as busy as bees, who were all needing needs to the sound of the shopping of truffle trees. So from the psychoanalytic theory from Freud, we get to see that, the Onsler, well, he was seeking his own pleasure, and he found that pleasure by destroying the forest, but becoming wealthy. Then we get to see that, at first maybe the Onsler intentions weren't to damage the forest, wasn't to destroy the forest, but as he got caught in all this materialistic world, his unconscious, I guess he was being unconscious about the damage that he was producing, but at the same time he was conscious that, eventually where the resources come, they weren't gonna last forever. But then we get to see that, that he becomes very immoral, he becomes very unselfish, and that's where we see his super ego from a Freudian perspective coming out. And he actually, I have a little sentence that actually says, the Onsler and Souls the Lorax seemingly justify his selfish actions. Furthering his greedy actions, the Onsler formulates a plan to get mighty reach. So you get to see that he got caught in this whole business ideas, that he stopped caring about others and of course about the forest. And I guess that, consciously the Onsler's business continued to grow, but it was at the expense of the forest. The answer was just, he didn't care if he was harming the forest. He just wanted to make money, and unfortunately nowadays we see this a lot in multiple businesses and companies. The onslaught greed illustrates the devastation caused by unchecked, relentless capitalism. And then, of course, we get to see the Lorax from the Jung's perspective, and we get to see that the Lorax is a symbol of arguing for social activism and preservation of nature. The Lorax foresees the impending consequences, and it symbolizes a voice of reason. And the Lorax becomes the voice of the powerless. And his activism and engagement in the Osler illustrates the need to stamp up against powerful, harmful business. And then we get to see in the book that, the Lorax says, unless. And, what does unless really means? And unless means, it's advocating the reader to consider future possibilities for restoring the once pristine truffle forest. And when the author gave, Ted the last truffle seed, then we get to see the omelets play off in the story, because once the author gives this little seed to this 12-year-old boy, he's basically telling him, unless you're willing to change the world, we're gonna see another forest. And so that's basically what the Lorax is teaching kids. So I hope you enjoy our little discussion. Thank you.